My name is Jessica Jaremchuk, and I'm here from Frank Cowan Company, a very, very proud supporter of the Future Oxford Expo and all the work that Oxford County has been doing. They're truly leading the way. I have the privilege of introducing this morning Milfred Hammerbacher. He's the co-founder and CEO of S2E Technologies. This company is partnering with Sifton Properties to create the largest smart community in North America. That is such an amazing accomplishment. And it's just down the road in London, Ontario. With more than 26 years of photovoltaic experience and leadership in technology, manufacturing, and business development, Milfred excels at navigating cultural sensitivities and regional business practices to generate positive outcomes. Recently, he completed a 3-year assignment as president of Canadian Solar Solutions for the Canadian and Global Project Development. Today, Milfred will speak about sustainable communities and progress made on the largest smart community in London, Ontario. So with pleasure, I introduce to you Milfred Hammerbacher.
It's okay if you want to keep the music going. I don't think we're on. Are we on? Hello? Hi. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a pretty exciting event, my first time at the Future Oxford event, and I applaud everybody for your forward thinking here. It's going to be a pleasure for me to present to you a few things. First of all, I'll chat with you a little bit about what we call a smart community, and specifically this community we're building in London, Ontario. We're pretty excited about being involved in that. Hopefully by the end of this talk, though, I can convince you that we don't have to wait till the future in order to start building these kind of communities today. So let's get started on my little journey here. Any of you been here? Problems coming at you from all sides? That's me, by the way. I have to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a news junkie. I've got all these news apps on my smartphone, and when I'm at home, more often than not, cable news is on the TV. So what does that say about me? I spend most of my time depressed, especially lately. But I'm optimistic and I'm excited about the future. So I'm depressed, optimistic, and excited. There's, I think, a condition that describes that. But I bring this up because it's always important to me to know, why do we do what we do? Why do I get up in the morning and go to work? So I'm going to start with the depressed stuff, and then hopefully we'll get into the exciting, great things for the future. So I believe that climate change is probably the biggest problem ever to face the human species. And 50% of the greenhouse gases that we generate here come from our buildings and our transportation. So that bothers me, especially in buildings. Whenever I see a new building being constructed, that building's not only, if it's not being built in an efficient way, is not only going to create greenhouse gases today, but it's going to create it tomorrow, the next day, the next 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. So really a building is something that has a huge long-term impact on our society. So that's one thing to think about. There is, I think, maybe some solutions to this problem, though. There are other problems. Our communities have been hit pretty hard by the big Great Recession a few years ago. And this is a chart that the City of London did a couple years ago. You know, you're supposed to talk about your products that you export, but in this case, they're exporting about $1.5 billion a year outside of their community to pay for energy that they import. So just think of a minute. Almost all communities go through this. What could that community do with an extra $1.5 million or $1 billion staying there? It could have a pretty significant impact. And then there's this problem. We human beings are a little bit strange. We love our big screen TVs, we love warm houses, but we don't want a power plant in our backyard. Heck, we don't even want wires in our backyard anymore. So how are we going to deal with this hunger for more power, and yet we don't want the stuff that generates it in our backyard? Maybe there's a solution for this too. And then this is a problem that's kind of near and dear to me. I spent a lot of my career in manufacturing, and I had the great opportunity a few years ago to build a solar module factory for Canadian Solar. I got to go all over southwest Ontario looking for a factory site. That was exciting, but also it was depressing to see all the empty factory buildings. Really made your heart sink sometimes. So there are a couple ways you can deal with all these depressing problems. We could bury our heads in the sand and hope they go away, or we can look for solutions. So now I'm going to get to the bright, exciting, why I'm optimistic part here. A few years ago, having been in the solar industry, I noticed, it was very easily noticed, a huge trend in the cost of technology. And specifically, solar panels, the cost has decreased a tremendous amount in the last 10 years. A lot of people don't realize that. And then you started to look around and see there were other technologies with similar massive declines in prices, like LED lighting. And then there are technologies like cold climate heat pumps that didn't even exist 10 years ago that now are quite competitively priced. So you start to see these things and wonder, you know, what's going on? I have a solar system. Being a solar guy, I've had a system on my house almost since the beginning of the Green Energy Act. But I always wondered, why am I the only one? There was only one other system on my block. Why? Because I knew it was a very good economic return. It was a question. Another thing at about the same time that has me very, very optimistic about the future. I've had the privilege of sitting on the board of 2 NSERC networks. NSERC is our National Science and Engineering Research Council. Several years ago, they decided a way to tackle research problems is to get a network of university researchers together and focus on a single problem. So they also asked for industry folks to serve on a board to oversee the universities to make sure they don't waste your taxpayer money. So that was me. I was making sure that your money wasn't being wasted. So I serve on the Photovoltaic Innovation Network and the Smart Net Zero Energy Buildings Network. That has been a really fantastic opportunity for me to work with some of the brightest minds here in Canada. And one thing that I can say with really no doubt, probably Canada's best asset is its universities and colleges and the young minds that are being educated in them. I think those are worth much more than all the oil sands in Alberta. So I'll go back to my intersection here. This is actually a real intersection in my life, but it wasn't at a street corner. It was in a hallway in a hotel in Ottawa back in May 2013. It was at one of the network board meetings where you have all the professors come up and they tell you about all the great things they're doing, and they're doing some really great things. And one of the last professors said at the end of his talk, if only I had a real project for my students to focus on, I think they would get a much more valuable education experience. So, an idea was born. The outcome of that moment is we got together and we basically defined a project. Let's see if we can find a project to show that you can build a net zero energy community today without any economic incentives and it be cost effective. So that was a big thing to want to do. And in order to do that, you have to create a pretty interesting team. The very first thing is we had to find a progressive real estate developer. Not easy to do. We opened or knocked on a lot of doors. Some of the doors didn't even open. Some of them closed pretty much right after they opened. But finally we found this developer in London, Sifton Properties. You may know them. They've done a lot of development. They've been around for a long time. So we gave them our pitch. We wanted to see if we can show that this is doable. And at the end they said, well, we've got this 70-acre property on the west side of London. Have at it. See what you can do. That was a great moment. But you need more than just that developer. You need a progressive community, something like Oxford right here. You need also a progressive LDC, in this case London Hydro. They got it. They saw a need to change. All those ingredients were really critical for pulling this project off. But we did it. The last and most important, though, was the universities and networks. We actually pulled together a team of 11 universities and colleges. We hired 90 people, graduate students, postdocs, co-op students, and did a four-month study on whether this was a feasible thing or not. Probably one of the 4 best months of my career, working with that many people, motivated, smarter than me. It was really an exciting time. And I can say it seems like it was pretty successful. The first thing that our team did, though, is we broadened the scope of our initial idea. Our initial idea was very energy focused, but we decided, you know what, we got to look at much more than just energy. And you can see we looked at a lot more than just energy. And it's important. A sustainable community involves a lot of different things. So Sifton gave us just a few boundary conditions. They said, okay, your concept needs to fit on our 70 acres. You need to have 2,000 living units and roughly about 400,000 square feet of commercial retail space. That was it. That was the boundary conditions. So we took that team and we divided it up into about 9 sub-teams and looked at all these different features that we thought were important for a smart community. We actually even had a marketing team of about 15 people. They went around the city of London with a video camera and asked people, what do you think would be important to make a livable community, a livable neighborhood? We took that input and folded that into our study as well. One of the reasons why we did the marketing study is because you could build this really energy efficient, sustainable community, but if nobody wants to live there, you probably fail. So that was an important part. I'm going to focus on just 5. There was over 2,000 pages of results that we got out of this study. So I don't think we have enough time to go through all the results here. So I'll focus on 5 of them. So the first thing we had to figure out is what is the best source of renewable energy for this site. So I'm a solar guy. I promise I wasn't biased in this at all. But in the end, we looked at wind, we looked at biogas, geothermal, and we will probably have other things besides solar in this community. But right now, photovoltaics, PV, is the main source of power for the community. Our concept has over 9 megawatts of PV in the community, and those are panels on rooftops, on the facades of buildings, and on carport canopies. One of the challenges we were concerned about is solar panels or glass, right? Can you really make a cool looking community with that much solar in it? And you'll see some of the renderings of buildings we're building, and I hope you'll agree that the answer is yes. It can be pretty cool looking. Of course, from the beginning, our goal was to see if we could do a net zero community. And there's a lot of definitions for net zero. Our definition is that you generate all the power you use in a year in that year. And we also had some other goals. We wanted to see if this was doable without any government subsidies. You guys probably are aware of the Green Energy Act and the FIT and microfit program and the controversies involved with all that. Well, we believe we can achieve net zero without those incentives anymore. That's a big step from where we were. The only thing we require is net metering. What is net metering? It just means that if you generate more power on your house than you use, you run the meter backwards. And fortunately, I believe in June, the province is coming out with a new net metering law that's going to allow that. So everything looks pretty good so far. We also looked at stormwater management. That was particularly important for this project because the tributaries that this property feeds has a rare brook trout in it. So Sifton had actually been working for like 5 years before we came along on a way to manage the stormwater management. So our team did a lot of work on that. We have a lot of natural filtration designs that we looked at, bioswells, various other techniques, permeable materials. There's a lot of materials out there, permeable concrete, permeable asphalt, that the water just soaks right through it. You don't need to build sewage pipes and all these things to manage the water. We also wanted to put make our stormwater management have attractive features to it as well, like ponds and waterfalls and those types of things. And this is a very interesting community, this picture out in BC, where they did just that. They took their stormwater and wastewater and made some very attractive features from it. The other one major emphasis we wanted this community was on the transportation. We had a team looking at bicycle ability, walkability, and we also wanted to have a very high density of electric vehicles in this community. The goal is 500 electric vehicles in the community. And so with that goal spawned another idea that we call a DC grid. So I'm going to apologize right up front. I'm going to get a little bit technical, so the techie people will really appreciate this and the other folks maybe not. But what we really did was 100 years ago there was a big battle between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. You know what the battle was? It was between AC current and DC current. What are we going to transmit our electricity with? So that was actually a pretty substantial battle, and Tesla won. AC current became our transmitted current throughout all of our communities in the world. But what's happened since? Well, we now have photovoltaics, which actually generates DC current. And we have a lot of applications which actually use DC current. Electric vehicles. Anything that has a battery uses DC current. LED lights, DC current. So our team thought, I wonder if we should revisit that battle and see if there might be a more economical way to save energy by doing a parallel DC grid. So that's basically what the smart DC grid is all about. It was so interesting that we actually got the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to support a more detailed feasibility study of this, and we're right now in the middle of that. But the goal will be is put as many electric vehicles as we can in the community, charge it in the most efficient and cost-effective way, and hopefully we can begin that transition to a fossil fuel-less transportation system. So nothing we're doing is small. We have big ideas. It's so much fun to work on this project. Maybe you can tell I'm not depressed now. So the last thing I'll talk about is this came up really strongly on all the surveys and communications we had with the citizens of London. Food seems to be centered to a good community making a neighborhood. You ask people, what brings you together? Food. And then you peel back that some more, and where does that food come from? And we see lots of booths here in this exhibition, is more and more important. People want to know where their food comes from, how it's made, and then you can go one step further. What's the carbon footprint? You know, how much carbon do we put in the atmosphere to bring a strawberry from southern Chile to Woodstock? So all those things were taken into account, and I felt like our students came up with some pretty cool concepts. They actually came up with a concept of putting a greenhouse on top of the grocery store. So you walk into the produce section and say, "From our rooftop, tomatoes." You know, it's kind of a cool thing. And then there was actually a student that built an aquaponics system at McMaster to look at raising fish. And so this is kind of the unnatural, natural cycle of life. So we take the waste stream from the greenhouse, we use that to feed the fish, the waste stream from the fish to fertilize the greenhouse. It's the way nature intended it. We're just doing it in this kind of urban atmosphere. Very cool project. And by the way, this is economical. There's a company in Montreal called Lufa that is a very successful business with greenhouses on top of warehouses and things in Montreal. So everything we tried to do, we always kept that economic part in our minds. You know, we can think up really wild ideas, but if they're not economical, it's going to be tough to sell them. So in the end, our team came up with a lot of benefits of doing this. But I think the one most near and dear to my heart is you do not have to sacrifice to do the right thing anymore. 26, 27 years in the solar business, most of my career I spent begging people, sacrifice. You know, you just have to pay a little bit more for this clean energy, but look what you'll do for your kids. You know, appealing to their sympathy, their passion. Now I can appeal to that much stronger human instinct, greed. You can actually make money doing this. Oh, it's so much easier to make a sell when you're appealing to that, sorry to say. In terms of the savings that this kind of community can do, it's pretty astounding. And one of the things that I didn't even realize till we got into this, you can actually save up to 40% of the energy of your building just by changing its orientation and shape. Free. Change the shape, change the orientation, where you put the windows, up to 40% of the energy. Astounding to me is most architects don't know that. So we have some education we got to do. But there are other things that we found. The cold climate heat pumps I talked about. Now they have outstanding returns on investment. There's other technologies. Increasing the insulation and air tightness of a building is a no-brainer. Do that. You're going to save a lot of money and save energy at the same time. Energy efficient appliances. There should not be appliances that don't have Energy Star ratings. It just makes common sense. So all those savings, we can reduce a standard house to a net zero house by 60%. We can reduce the energy consumption of that house. And then to make it net zero, we just put solar on the roof to get the other 40%, and the building is net zero. So I talked about this as a good investment. IRR is a return on investment calculation. So the investment you have to make your community net zero has a return of about 10%. That's pretty good. It was a lot better a couple weeks ago, but our government decided to cut electricity rates by 17% and move that to the tax base. So now a developer won't see quite as much savings, but it's still a good investment. There are other benefits as well. No one, to my knowledge, has figured out how to charge for sunshine. So once you put the solar system on your house, you don't have any fuel costs. And so it doesn't matter what happens to electricity or gas prices, your costs are fixed for the next life of your project, which the life of a solar panel is guaranteed to 25 years, and it probably lasts another 15. We also focused on resilience in our design. In case we're not as successful in combating climate change, it's going to affect all of us. There'll be more heavy rains, there'll be more droughts. So how do we design a community to deal with those kinds of things? We're also part of the design. And perhaps a little bit surprising to me is the concept of smart community. You've probably heard folks say, you know, we can't afford to fight climate change. It's going to impact the economy. I can say there's a tremendous amount of new business opportunities out of this concept. These are just a few of the concepts that we are either actively right now pursuing or are going to pursue in London. One that's not on here is we signed an MOU a few months ago with the City of London to develop a driverless commuter vehicle to bring people from this community to the nearest mass transit system. These are the kinds of things that can come out of the idea of sustainability and smart. Lots of opportunities. So, in the end of this study, we presented it to Sifton, and fortunately, they loved it. And so, a new project was born. The community is called West 5. It's one of the largest smart communities, perhaps the largest smart community in the world when it's built. It will involve about $1 billion of investment before it's completed, and 70 acres, mixed use. Net zero is still the goal that we're on track towards, and much more sustainable features in the community. There is a lot more information on our website, and West 5 has its own website if you want to check that out. So it's happening. This is the first building. Okay, I got to admit another thing about myself. I'm lazy. I should have a picture of the building. It's built, but I still have the render, okay? I'll use the excuse that every time I'm out there it's cloudy, but that's not true. So that's the building. It's a 60,000 square foot building. Here's some of the features. It's really a cool building. Sifton's new headquarters is now in that building, and the rest of the building is they're currently leasing out. So that is a real thing. It's no longer just a dream. But there's more. So we are in the middle of construction of the first group of townhomes. The first ones will be occupied in May of this year. These townhomes are all also, they're actually better than net zero, meaning we can generate more energy from the solar on these townhomes than we'll use in the townhomes. And then that energy can be used elsewhere in the community. So the concept of doing net zero community, and I applaud what you guys are trying to do, it's actually going to be easier to do it on a city scale or a community scale than it is on a building scale. You have a lot more flexibility on how to achieve that. And so we can, in this plan, we will actually have buildings, like I say, that generate more energy than they use. Others, we're not going to quite get there, and so we'll be able to share that energy amongst the buildings in the community. And that is one of the buildings that may not get to net zero, although we're going to try really hard. This is in design right now. Diamond Schmidt is the architect firm working on this. So it'll be the first high-rise. If we achieve net zero, it'll be the first high-rise in the world to achieve net zero. So it's a big goal. We'll see. I'll come back next year and tell you how we did. So, buildings and stuff, okay, that's boring. Some people it's boring, but there's a lot of cool features in this community. The original layout that Sifton had for the property before we came there, it was lower density. There weren't as many high-rises, but there was no grass. It was all concrete. So we came up on some of the buildings so that we could have more public spaces, some really interesting. We even have a smart dog park in the plans. That's pretty cool for walking your dog. So these are features that that we didn't just dream up. These are features that in our marketing study people they want. You know, they want to have that kind of space to get together with their neighbors. So that was all great news, but why are we not building more of these communities across Canada? We've shown it's economical. You can actually make more money doing it. There is no technology challenges. The technologies exist today to do what we're doing. So why is London the only one doing that? Okay. It's us. We are the last remaining obstacle to doing this type of community. And what do I mean by that? Well, we have this little thing about us that we love the status quo. We love the status quo. And I go one step further. Real estate developers, they're superhumans. They really love the status quo. And it goes on and on and on. How do we break that is a problem. So this is detailed, but I got to put this. I stole this line from this orange-haired president south of the border. The process is rigged, okay? The process is rigged. It's not just the consumers that love the status quo. If you look at the detailed process of what it takes to go from concept, design, permitting, build, and sell of a community or a house, you'll see all these things, the process, are built up to really hang on to the status quo. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Most companies today do RFPs. They request quotes, and usually they'll get 5 quotes, and who wins the quote? Almost always the lowest bid. Lowest bid, especially municipalities, you guys have to go through crazy things to not use your lowest bid on a project. So what does that lowest bid requirement do? So an architect knows he's going to bid and the lowest bid's going to win. He's going to try to be as efficient in his design as he can. So what's he going to do? He's going to take pieces of designs he's already done, cookie cut them, put them in together into this new building. It's faster, it's cheaper, but what's missing? Innovation. It's really a killer of innovation. Then you take that architect and he goes out for bids with engineering companies. Same thing happens. This engineer has worked with this HVAC company for 20 years. They've got a design. It's easy to plug it into a new building. You want me to use this, what do you call it? Cold climate heat pump? I don't want to do that. Another obstacle. So this status quo is built into our system. I'll go to the next step. You finally have a design, you go in for permitting with the city planner. I'll give you an example of what happened in London. We want our buildings to face south because we want to put the solar on the south face, we want the windows on the south face. But these particular townhomes were on an east, or they were on a northwest road, so the city building code says your buildings need to face the main road. So they wanted our buildings to face west, we wanted them to face south. So that, as I told earlier, can cost up to 40% energy to do that. Fortunately, because the City of London was involved in this, we told them what we're doing from the beginning, it wasn't too much of a problem to get them to give an exception to the code. So our buildings are going to be facing south. But that's just another example of, you know, we've got all these rules and everything, and it's really hard to do something new and different. I'm going to go further. I'm spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's important because I think this group probably represents different phases of this. So you go out to bid to your contractors. The contractor's been installing this for 20 years. You want them to install that? Oh, I'm going to have to increase the price for that because I don't know how to do that. Problem is the different suppliers are not training these contractors on how to use the new technology. Then you go to the last step. You got to sell this. It's new and different. So I have a real story. My partner sold his house a couple years ago. Obviously, he had a solar system on his house. When he was talking to the real estate sales lady, she said, "Can you take that solar system off of the house? I think it's going to affect the value of the property." You know, that solar system is probably going to make the next homeowner $50,000, $60,000 over 20 years, but the real estate salesperson didn't understand the value. So we've got a lot of things we've got to change, not just the consumer and the status quo. Okay, sorry, get off my soapbox on that. So how do we change human behavior? I got 3 ideas. Education is certainly a critical part to changing human behavior. I have hope because I see all these students that we're working with in the universities. Eventually that's going to get there, but we need to do more in educating to show people this can be done. So the property we're doing in Sifton is going to be a great education tool, and thankfully Sifton is very eager to do that. They're building a discovery center so people can come in and see all the different features in this community. Marketing is also important. I'm a technical guy, but I believe marketing is king. A few years ago, some people got together, they had some rocks, and they said, I think we can sell pet rocks. And they made millions of dollars marketing and selling pet rocks. If we can't market and sell, you can save the planet by doing this and make money, something's wrong. We're not marketing this well at all. So more marketing is important. The last thing, the dirty word I'll use is regulation. You know, if you can't get people to voluntarily change, then you can regulate. I have a friend who's a builder. I'll never forget this. He probably regrets telling me this. He said, Milfred, back in the 1950s, we built houses without any insulation. We'd probably still be doing that today if they didn't change the building code. He said, all my colleagues, they're going to complain and blah, 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 but changing the code is probably the fairest way to deal with this. Everybody has to do it. So that was from a builder. I won't mention his name. So we've got a lot of work to do to see more of these smart communities. This event here that you guys are doing today really gives me hope. I really like what Oxford and Woodstock is doing, and I wish you guys the best of luck. Now, I don't know, timing here, I can close now, or I have about a 3-minute video of a fly-through that our students did of the community. Anyone have a, no? Show the video, okay. We will show the video then. Well, maybe we'll show the video. And maybe we won't. I'm going to talk while you're watching this. Those of you that have some gray like me, you probably have wondered whether our young people are going to just have no value playing video games all the time. This was done by second-year Ryerson students. They started with nothing and in 2 months developed this whole video off of the concepts we done. So playing video games can have some advantages. They learned the software, they did everything in 2 months. So there is hope. It's just music. So that's our community. Sifton will be doing a grand opening in June, so pay attention to the news and radio. I think there'll be some announcements. Encourage everyone to come out and see what they're doing. And I can't wait to see what happens here in Woodstock. That's my challenge. Let's make a bigger one than London. Thank you very much.